This is Nvidia's best value GPU, and no, it is not the RTX 4070. It's not even an Nvidia 4000 series product, but it is less than 6 months old, while boasting impressive numbers, and we'll come back to that in a bit. But this is the RX 6600 XT, the champion for the best value graphics card right now at $230. And even though both of these are the best price to performance option for AMD and Nvidia, neither one of these nor Intel Arc gets my recommendation for best GPU to buy. Let me explain. With how the GPU market has been shaping up recently, the potential GPUs that you could buy range anywhere between 22% inflated to 40% discounted, which is the biggest problem. The RX 7900 XT has dropped by $100, making it better value over the XTX, while AMD 6000 series continues to drop in price, making most of the current generation even less compelling. So today we're going to cover 3 main topics so that you can fully understand which are the best GPUs to buy right now. We will be comparing every GPU's performance, their price, including how much discounted or inflated they are, and then critically analysing their value, especially in light of the recent release of the RTX 4070. We have a lot to cover here, and with updated figures, this might be the biggest and most thorough breakdown there is to find out which of the 34 currently sold GPUs are the best ones to buy. And stay tuned to the end, because I'm also going to give you guys my recommendations for each manufacturer for budget, mid-range, and high-end, because the best value GPU is not necessarily the one that I'm recommending for most people. Let me explain. So I have a question. Are you an avid PC enthusiast stuck with that ugly ass Windows watermark ruining your gaming and streaming experience? Well, I have great news for you. WhoKeys is a software licensing website dedicated to getting you affordable keys. And the best part is you can get rid of that watermark in a matter of minutes. All you need to do is head down to the video description, click the sponsor link, and enjoy an additional 25% off using my coupon code TR20. With PayPal checkout and quick key delivery, all you need to do is hit the Windows key, type activate, and paste your key right here to become fully activated. It really is that simple and that cheap. So head down to the video description if that sounds right for you. And thank you WhoKeys for sponsoring this video. So the first place that we need to start before we dive into performance and value is to explain the data. What we are looking at here is rasterization performance over a magnitude of games to give us the most holistic result using the 5800 X3D. This means if you have a worse performing CPU or only play AAA extremely demanding games, you may need to adjust those numbers lower. However, if you play lighter titles, expect higher results. It's also worth noting that unlike AMD and Nvidia, Intel Arc has a much greater swing in terms of performance, depending on whether you're playing a DX9 or say DX12 title. But this is an average and will best allow us to directly compare one GPU to another. So the temptation here is to take a look at your budget and compare it against the cost and just max it out. But given how wildly different pricing is right now compared to MSRP and how volatile the GPU market is, this may result in you getting a much worse performing GPU compared to something else, and also highlights how important these videos are. Let me show you. What we're looking at here is the launch MSRP of each of these graphics cards. But this price and comparing them at this price is an absolute lie, because for nearly every single GPU sold right now, the actual price that you will pay is anywhere between 22% more to 40% less, which is largely dependent on manufacturer and model. But how did we get these numbers? What I'm calling real world prices. Well, I've been recording the cheapest versions I can find for every one of these cards, almost every single day. And these numbers equate to the cost of the cheapest 10% for the entire last month. The reason why I have such exhaustive data on this is that I've been continuously updating the comment section of the last one of these value analysis videos, so that you get the most up-to-date prices below in the comment section, which is an important side note. I will be migrating those efforts to this video until we do the next one, which you can check if there's a more recent version in our GPU value playlist. But for now, if you want the most up-to-date best prices I can find for any one of these GPUs, head down to the comment section below. But with the 4070, I have been able to find them in stock at $600 over the last few days, but as it was just recently released, we do not have the same historical data for it yet. So what I've done is color it in orange to highlight that difference, because if the card does get scalped, the value calculation will look very different. But comparing our real world prices to MSRP, we can see just how much each card is discounted or inflated by. right here, with the 3080 12GB being the most inflated compared to MSRP, and has been for quite some time now. Conversely, the 6950 XT has been the most discounted over the last few months, and can be often purchased for about 40% off, which contributes to RDNA 2 being the most discounted architecture overall. Intel Arc has seen about a 14% reduction for the cards that I can purchase here in the US, which coupled with big driver improvements recently makes them a more attractive buy. And Nvidia Ampere is still mostly at its multi-year-old MSRP until you get to the 3080 Ti, which likely won't change until Nvidia painstakingly fills out the rest of their 4000 series, at the pace of a moderately disabled snail. Don't get me wrong, AMD really hasn't been moving any quicker, but at least there's some viable options in the previous generation at a good discount. And we aren't expecting Intel Battlemage until probably 2024. But the new generation has already seen a bit of a discount. However, this is for the 7900 XT and the RTX 4080, which have been selling pretty poorly since launch. So it'll be interesting to see if they are now worth considering with these updated real-world prices. And the reason why we need to investigate that is because a well-discounted card is not inherently a good value card, compared to a GPU that may be selling for over MSRP. And that's because the value calculation is only partly affected by cost, and the other crucial component is performance. So what we need to do is take a look at the performance of each of these cards to extract, quantify, and compare value, which means that we need to go back to the graph that we saw earlier, but instead of using MSRP as our cost metric, we will use real-world prices, which will allow us to see just which cards offer the best value right now, and how much you need to spend to game at 1080p, 1440p, and 4K. So before we take a look at which are the best cards and my recommendations for budget, mid-range, and high-end, let's start with what GPUs you should focus on for your use case, given a resolution and frame rate you want to target. Well, taking a look down this graph, any GPU that we have listed here will be capable of 1080p 60 frames per second for most games. But if you want to better utilize your 144Hz monitor, for example, I recommend looking at anything that averages that frame rate, meaning RX 6750 XT, RTX 3070 Ti, or better. And this is a breakdown for 1440p and 4K, the ones that I would recommend focusing on as we move into our value comparison, which means it is time to show off our new performance per dollar king. What we have here is a cost, frame rate, and value comparison graph. Compared using a 1440p resolution, 1080p and 4K will be up next. But on the left-hand side, we have all of our GPUs with their real-world prices, also represented by the blue bar. The white bar is the average frame rate, and the pink is the calculated value in cost per frame. What this means is the best value card at 1440p for each manufacturer are the Arc A750, RX 6600 XT being the best value 1440p card overall, and the new RTX 3060 Ti with GDDR6X memory, which comes pretty close to the 3070 at about $40 less. The worst value cards at 1440p starts with something that we haven't actually seen before, purely because of updated prices from AMD. Last month, the 7900 XT was worse compared to the XTX, but this month things have changed. Now the XT has dropped by $100, making its value significantly better, and proving just how important these updates are compared to launch day reviews with old prices. The RK770 16GB is the worst value for Intel, and the RTX 3090 Ti becomes the worst value card overall, coming in over $10.50 per frame. 4K shows a mostly similar matchup, but because we're running a higher resolution, you need to double check that the frame rate will be enough to drive the experience you want, making the best value card that will do over 60 frames per second in our test suite the 6750 XT from AMD and the GDDR6X 3060 Ti from Nvidia, with none of the Arc GPUs being able to hit 60 at 4K. The 7900 XTX narrowly loses to the 6500 XT, which probably wouldn't be a 4K consideration anyway, making the RTX 3090 Ti still the worst value option again. And brings us onto the most popular resolution. Let's take a look at 1080p, which, as we can see, is mostly a continued trend. The 6600 XT narrowly beats the 6650 for the best value 1080p card overall, crowning a new champion this time. The A750 comes out on top for Intel, and the GDDR6X 3060 Ti wins for Nvidia, making the 3090 Ti basically pointless when you look at everything else. But what I want to highlight here, as you look over the graph, is we've been purely comparing rasterization performance for all of these GPUs. And just because something has the best value doesn't mean that it's the one that I would choose or the one that I would necessarily recommend. When we take into context other factors, stuff like memory capacity, professional applications, upscaling and ray tracing support, these are all things that could affect how long the card is usable in modern or future scenarios. So before I show you which cards I would consider for each manufacturer and price range, let me explain what factors you probably want to take into consideration, but may be less obvious when choosing your next GPU. So when it comes to finally choosing which graphics card to buy, the obvious choice is to go for the card with the best value, based on what we have just covered. And the 6600 XT is the standout choice right now, being the best all-round option in terms of value. But looking at a GPU purchase this way is only taking this very moment into consideration. And there's a few reasons why I would deviate from the best value card to something more appropriate long-term. Let me show you. Take a look at recent demanding games like The Last of Us and Hogwarts Legacy. We're seeing a significant amount of memory usage when you turn up the detail, even at 1080p. And this causes a lot of graphics cards with 8GB of VRAM, the most popular amount for the last generation, to already show their age, forcing them to swap assets in and out of memory due to space limitations, which can cause the game to stutter and in rare occasions crash when not properly handled by the game engine. In fact, Steve from Hardware Unboxed did a really good job covering this, and I'll have his video linked below. But I also wanted to test this for myself, and I can confirm his results. So choosing a card with more memory may be a wise decision for two reasons. The first being your experience playing current demanding or future games, and even if you only play lighter titles. The second reason can affect everyone, and that's the resale value of the card. As games get more and more demanding and require more memory, the resale value of cards that struggle to accommodate popular games is going to be lower than models with more memory. How much so is almost impossible to predict, but the fact that it will is almost inevitable. In fact, on eBay, you would expect to pay about 33% more for a 6GB 1060 compared to the 3GB version, which isn't perfectly apples to apples, but is worth noting. And the 6GB version would make you about $25 more, offsetting the cost of your purchase. That may not sound like a lot, but the price difference between the 6700 and the 6700 XT is only about $35 right now, so you could basically cover that difference. Other things that I would also consider when choosing a GPU to buy is stuff like ray tracing and professional application support. Nvidia is typically the best for professionals, while AMD has the best rasterized gaming performance for your money. Essentially, if you require a GPU to encode 3D model or other GPU-based computation, default to Nvidia, unless benchmarks show otherwise. But if you just game, AMD will give you more frames for your dollar, as we saw in our value graph. And if you anticipate playing a lot of ray trace games, it is true that Nvidia does do a better job of this when you compare otherwise similarly performing graphics cards. Though this isn't something that I would put a lot of weight on or pay a lot of attention to unless you're buying a mid to high-end graphics card, as lower-end models just really can't handle many ray trace scenarios to begin with. It's like comparing a soggy potato to a wet fart. There's technically a winner, but I don't want to play your sadistic game. But when it comes to Intel Arc Alchemist models, they come with a warning from me. They can have good value, but are more temperamental when it comes to performance consistency between games, which means if you are considering one, make sure that you look into performance in the games that you play most. So with that in mind, let's go over my recommendations for each manufacturer for budget, mid-range, and high-end. As I mentioned in my best budget GPUs video, we are defining budget, mid-range, and high-end based on evenly spreading the products that are currently available from this generation and the previous. What this means is that our categories are self-defined and objective, with budget being the lower 11 GPUs up to $310, mid-range up to $649, and high-end up to $1,600. So let's cover the best graphics cards for each manufacturer within those market segments, before I then crown a couple standout winners based on current prices. AMD holds the performance per dollar crown, currently the RX 6600 XT, which can be regularly had for about $230, giving you a decent 1080p and 1440p experience. But if you had a bit more money to spend, the 6700 non-XT is about $80 more, but gives you 25% more memory, and on average, 10 to 15% more frames in our test suite when looking at 1080p and 1440p performance. So if you had a bit of wiggle room, that would be my recommendation, and would likely serve you better better for longer, while retaining more resale value. For Nvidia, the only two budget options are the RTX 3050 and the 3060 8GB. And as they both have the same amount of memory and extremely similar value, I would say get the 3060 8GB if you can afford it, as the 3050 is dropping below 60 frames per second at 1440p in our test suite. Intel Arc comes down to the A750 and A770 8GB. As they perform quite similarly, the A750 would be my preferred option, as you're not getting a whole lot more for the increased cost of the A770. Which brings us onto mid-range, and let's start with Nvidia, as I'm pleasantly surprised by the new 3060 Ti GDDR6X version, which I originally gave a pretty hard time to, because at its previous price, it was really not very good value. But now pricing is settled down to about $430, it's become the best value GPU Nvidia currently sells, and provides a great 1080p and 1440p experience, even mid to high refresh depending on the game and the graphics settings. But if you were concerned about the 8GB of memory and wanted to remain Nvidia, you'll need to jump up to the RTX 3080 10GB, or the 4070, with the 4070 being the better value option and nearly $50 less. For AMD, there are several good options here, with the 6750 XT coming in at $350, only $5 more than the 6700 XT, and provides the best mid-range value right now, while also coming in with a relatively generous 12GB in memory, while comfortably beating the 3060 Ti. But if you're looking for something closer to 3080 or 4070 performance, the 6800 XT comes in at $90 to $140 cheaper respectively, while beating them both across the board, and currently providing better value than its non-XT counterpart. For Arc, the only option here is the A770 16GB, which is pretty cheap, but at only $15 less than the 6750 XT, I would honestly be going that route compared to the Arc GPU. Even though it has more memory, you'll just get better value, better performance, and more consistent performance with the 6750 XT. But let's talk high-end GPUs, and the surprising current winner of the new generation is the 7900 XT, now that it's had its price reduction. Previously, the XTX was beating it, but at $800, the XT makes a lot more sense now, while still handling 1440p high refresh and 4K gaming. But the problem with current Radeon 7000 series is actually AMD's own previous generation, and the 6950 XT gets you most of the way there at $150 less, making it the best value high-end GPU you can currently purchase for rasterized gaming. And for Nvidia, the 4070 Ti makes the most sense at the high end and holds the best value right now, as high-end 3000 series is just outrageously priced. And even though AMD's cards beat it in terms of value, it's still an extremely capable 1440p and 4K card, though I would have liked to have seen it have more than 12GB of memory. Which brings us onto my top picks. The 6600 XT is an excellent option at $220 and is the best value card currently on sale, but the 6750 XT stands out to me at $350, steep discount, great performance for the money, and 50% more memory compared to most other GPUs around that price range. Next is the RTX 3060 Ti GDDR6X version that was released in October 2022, which at time of recording is the best value Nvidia GPU. Now the prices have settled down to about $430. You are paying a premium for Nvidia, but it has the least amount of Nvidia tax right now, with great performance. But make sure that you aren't buying the wrong version. There are two 3060 Ti's, one with G6X memory, one with G6. It's all very confusing. So check the comment section below for daily updated best prices for all of these cards. And the 6950 XT at sub $700 is a fantastic high-end deal that will serve most people extremely well. But if you wanted AMD's best, the flagship 7900 XTX can be had for about $950 if you're lucky, and is specifically this Phantom gaming model from ASRock, about $100 less than what the reference design currently sells for. So if you want to see how it compares to AMD's reference version, you can check out the full comparison by clicking here. It's one of those scenarios where I would recommend it, but I didn't personally go for it. But it is worth a watch. Otherwise guys, share, like, subscribe, they are always appreciated, and I hope you have an amazing day.